What's up, guys? Welcome to DeathGroundReviews. I've got another movie review for you. Decided to stick with John Carpenter. I really got a kick out of watching The Thing, and I've reviewed some of his movies in the past. I reviewed Halloween, Prince of Darkness, and The Mouth of Madness, and I decided I need to binge just a bunch of his movies, at least all the horror movies, and do a review for you guys. And I decided to start my binge with The End, the last film that John Carpenter ever made. This is a movie titled The Ward, and it came out in 2010, 2011, sometime around then. The writers for this film were Michael Rasmussen and Sean Rasmussen. Stars Amber Heard, Mamie Gummer, Danielle Panabaker. You've got Laura Leigh, Lindsay Fonseca, Micah Borum, Jared Harris. And you had Sydney Sweeney as Alice, the young Alice. I took a glance at just the reviews of this movie, and, a lot of them were quite bad. A lot of people seemed very disappointed in this film. And so that just intrigued me. I wanted to see how bad this movie really was. And to put it in a nutshell, for me, this was not his best film. It was weak. And it's too bad because, Carpenter, he's directed some great movies, great horror films in the past. And it's sad that he finished his career with this disappointing whimper. So what's the basic premise of The Ward? So the story takes place in 1966. And it's about a young woman named Kristen who's committed to a psychiatric unit where it seems that an angry spirit of a former patient is haunting the girls who are being treated there. And Kristen makes desperate escape attempts after the staff ignore her warnings about the spirit. And there's a twist in the end. And from the reviews I glanced at, it seems that twist in the end was something many people were disappointed about. They kind of felt it was overly predictable. But I'll kind of comment on that more later. So this film, it came out after a 10-year hiatus. So John Carpenter, he had become burned out. He had fallen out of love with cinematic storytelling. And he takes a 10-year break. During this break, he participates in an anthology called The Masters of Horror. And it's during this anthology that he realizes what about the craft he had fallen in love with in the first place. And he decides, man, I want to make another movie again. And then, the script for The Ward comes along. It's the perfect timing. And he decides to pick it up. But, I think maybe it's just those 10 years that he wasn't behind the camera just really, maybe put on the rust. 10 years since you've really buckled down to make a movie, and there's probably a sense of wanting to play it safe a little bit. But maybe he just played it a little too safe, because the film definitely feels lackluster. It feels a bit by the numbers and kind of overly predictable. A few facts, though, about the production of the film. It was shot in Spokane, Washington, and at the Eastern State Hospital in Medical Lake, Washington. And the outside of the hospital, it's based on the real-life, now demolished, McCauley Hospital. And the film was shot at a real operating mental hospital, and the crew was caged in to prevent patients from intervening. And it leads me to wonder if, the actors were able to observe any of these mental patients, and perhaps they used quirks and personality traits to inspire their characters, inspire their performances. But I haven't been able to find any facts on that ever happening, but it would be interesting to know. So back to the question, what did I think about this film? Or maybe a better question could be, was there anything I liked about the film? I did like, there were moments throughout the film where Carpenter shows little snippets of backstory about what happened to Kristen in the abandoned farmhouse, where she's handcuffed in the basement, and this burly man with a beard comes down into the basement, coming towards her. Those scenes are very foreboding. and they did hold my interest. They kept me curious as I was watching the film. So I thought that worked fine, how he interspersed it throughout the narrative. And there were a couple death scenes in the movie that were somewhat effective. One girl gets a lobotomy prod, rammed up her eye into her brain. That had me squirm a little bit when I watched it. And another girl was cooked alive by the electric shock therapy machine. That one also made me squirm with discomfort a little bit. I thought Amber Heard did well as the obstinate and aloof Kristen. She's this girl that strongly believes she's not crazy and feels she's being manipulated and controlled, and she's determined to break free. Much of the performances amongst the mental patients were generally fine. I mean, there were moments where the acting became a little bit hammy. Some moments, kind of felt a little bit corny, a little bit stereotypical. So, I mean, it overall generally worked fine. There was one scene, though, that I thought was a big goof. It's when Kristen's meeting with Dr. Harris for the first time. And at one point, she ends up sneaking like a letter opener from his desk when she comments about the mirror on the wall having a camera behind it recording them. And he glances over at the mirror, and she sneaks a letter opener from his desk and tries to use it later that night to escape. Like, what on earth is that guy leaving a letter opener just right there on his desk with a mental patient sitting in his office? That seemed absolutely stupid. I think protocol in a place like that, they would have sharp objects locked away. They wouldn't just leave it open on the desk for a mental patient to take. So I thought that was a big goof up in one scene of the movie. Were most of the jump scares predictable? Absolutely. I think about every jump scare moment in this movie I completely predicted. And, the thing is, though, most horror movies I watch, much of the jump scares I can predict. So that doesn't necessarily ruin a movie for me just because I can predict a lot of the jump scares. Like I'll re-watch horror movies that I love over and over again. I can predict every aspect of it, but I still love to watch them. I think a key thing that makes a horror story effective for me and scary is if I'm invested in the character. And in this film, I just didn't find myself that invested in Kristen. Maybe there needed to be more backstory or something like that, but yeah, I just was not that invested in her character. And thus, I think that's part of the reason a lot of the jump scare moments and such just were not that effective and scary for me. And yes, of course, the twist in the ending, it turns out that this is all just a delusion brought on by multiple personalities, and Kristen is this delusional creation to fight back against the malevolent Alice within her. And, people found that to be too overly predictable. And I think the element that was predictable was that it would be some kind of mental delusion. And the very setting and putting this character as a psychiatric patient, I think, made that element predictable. And there is a potential kind of interesting theme in that, that our memories kind of serve as ghosts that haunt us in our life. And there's always kind of a wrestling conflict within ourselves. We're trying to weed out and destroy those more malevolent parts of ourselves. But yes, my overall verdict of the film when I finished it was just meh. Nothing about it really stood out. Everything just kind of felt too safe, too easy. Seemed like John Carpenter didn't really want to challenge himself when he made this movie. Now, that doesn't mean I hated it. I've definitely seen worse horror movies than this one, but I am glad I didn't have to spend movie theater money to watch it. And I want to hear your thoughts about The Ward. When you watched it, did you feel just kind of meh at the end of it? What do you think could have improved the movie? Yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments. But that concludes my review of The Ward, directed by John Carpenter. And this is DeathGroundReviews, the monster that devours horror, suspense, and all those things of the fantastic. I'll see you next time.